Welcome to the Advanced Ethanol Building Plants Coming Online panel. We have 4 companies that need no introduction. You're probably familiar with all of them. 4 people that need no introduction. So I'm going to skip over most of that part. We have to get it all done in an hour. What I've asked the group to do is talk quickly, do a quick presentation, because wherever we go, we get the same sentiment, whether it's Capitol Hill, the media, the White House. They want to see clear visual evidence of progress in our industry. We are making incredible progress. We are building plants. We are lowering technological costs and enzyme costs. I'm really excited about this year. But without further ado, I think we'll move into the presentations, and then the second part of it will hopefully be a discussion. So if you have questions, please do come to the microphone. I will ask them if you don't, so you may prefer to ask them yourself. So Chris Standlee with Abengoa, former board member, board chair at the Renewable Fuels Association. I'll stop right there and let Chris talk about his plants in Hugoton.
Thanks very much, Brooke, and welcome everyone to this afternoon's presentation. I love this title, Building Plants Coming Online. You know, how many years have we all sat around and said, you know, in 5 years that we're going to see some commercial production, in 2 years, in 1 year, next year. I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, that I am thrilled to finally be able to say that this is the pivotal year for second-generation ethanol in the United States and perhaps in the world. Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal. How do I do this? I'm going to lose all my time trying to figure out how to advance the slide, Brooke. Oh,
just the play button.
That would be logical. Anyway, we at Abengoa are thrilled to be able to do that. For those of you that don't know Abengoa, we are an international energy and environment company. The bioenergy business is currently headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. From St. Louis, we operate 15 biofuels facilities around the world on 3 continents, United States, Europe, Brazil. Those are the commercial scale facilities, not counting pilot or demonstration scale facilities. We produce close to 800 million gallons of ethanol, have that capacity, and some biodiesel also. We have been in the first-generation ethanol business for well over 20 years and looking very much forward to the entrance into the cellulosic side and second-generation technology. So for the last 10 years, Abengoa has been focused on developing its own proprietary commercial second-generation technology, enzymatic hydrolysis technology. And we have worked closely with the Department of Energy. We have developed this technology through laboratory scale, through pilot plant scale in York, Nebraska, through demonstrations plant scale. And we've operated thousands and thousands of hours to produce cellulosic ethanol from various agricultural residues. Today, I am very happy to say that we are in the process, really, of starting up our commercial scale facility in Hugoton, Kansas. The slide talks a little bit about the details of that facility, but just briefly, it's a 25 million gallon per year facility, but also has the capacity to produce 21 megawatts of electrical power from a biomass boiler. We're located on a 400-acre parcel in the extreme southwest corner of Kansas. We were fortunate enough to have completed a startup of the first phase of that facility. We started up the boiler, used biomass to fuel the boiler, generated electricity and sold electricity to the grid in December of 2013. Now we are within just a few weeks of beginning a startup on the ethanol portion of the facility, and as I mentioned before, we believe this is a major milestone for us and for the cellulosic industry in general. Tremendous economic benefits, as noted on this slide, of a facility like this. We're talking 75 jobs, about a $5 million annual payroll. That's permanent jobs. I can also tell you that since July, on-site, we have had 1,000 full-time construction workers on-site virtually every day since July of last year, and that's a huge economic generator for southwestern Kansas, I can tell you that. Our objective is to complete this facility, get it operational early this year, and ultimately get our efficiencies down to the point where within a very short period of time, where we can, for operation costs, not counting capital costs, but operations costs will approach that $2 per gallon milestone. So that's a great deal. I do have a couple of pictures because I'm almost out of time already. So this is a photograph of the facility with some of the biomass bales in the background, or the biomass stacks. Those are large stacks, each containing about 1,000 tons of biomass, which is about 1 day's supply for this facility. This is a photograph of the cogeneration unit and the boiler, which was started up again back in December. We also have photographs of some of the fermenters, and it's hard to get a sense of scale. I keep telling my guys that I want a photograph with some employees in it, some workers, and they say, well, look, you have that, and you can't tell, but there's about a dozen employees lined up on that middle catwalk there. But just hard, what can we do? We either show the plant or we show the people. You can't do both. We do have a unique type of biomass input area, so I had to include a picture of that. We can talk more about that in the Q&A later. I want to talk a little bit, just really briefly, about the feedstocks. We are going to use agricultural residues in Yucatan. We're talking primarily corn stover, but also wheat straw. The amazing thing about Yucatan is we've done an analysis of a 50-mile radius of the facility, and within that 50-mile radius of the facility, there is 15,300,000 tons of biomass available. And even our facility, which is 25 million gallons of ethanol plus 21 megawatts of co-generated electricity, will only use, of that 15.3 million tons of biomass available, we only need the 0.3. So it's a fairly incredible conceptual number of what's available in the area. The other thing that I want to talk about, and then I will sit down, is simply the fact that we've experienced tremendous improvements in efficiencies, and I really have great expectations and a great belief in the future of this industry. If you just look at what's happened over the last 10 years, the last 4 years, from 2010 through 2014, our yields on gallons per ton of biomass have increased dramatically from 55, actually we're up to about 80 tons or 80 gallons per ton at this point. Enzyme costs have decreased substantially through the use of our own proprietary enzymes that we've developed through a cooperative agreement with Dyadic. Decreased from $1.85 a gallon to roughly 30 cents per gallon estimated at this point. And then overall production costs decreasing from $4 per gallon to approaching $2 per gallon, we think, by the end of this year. So that's a huge deal. Abengoa is using its competencies to diversify our feedstocks, diversify our products. We're already working to diversify feedstocks into a municipal solid waste, and we have developed opened up a demonstration scale facility in Europe over this last summer that uses MSW as a feedstock, and we are in the process of doing pilot plant projects now for different projects, or different products, biochemicals, biofuels, biochemicals, and plastics and other products. So with that, I'm going to sit down and let somebody else talk, but we're very excited to be here today.
Thanks, Brooke. It's a pleasure to be here as well. Yeah, I did come out of our oil and refining sector in DuPont, and some of my friends call me. It's kind of like the lunch we had earlier today, and started asking me questions about what are we doing in biofuels with all of their oil and gas friends. But it's a lot of fun. So how do I actually do this? Okay. There we go. So most of you don't know who DuPont is. DuPont's an old company, as Brooke said, started in 1802, but we've gone through a lot of transformations over those couple of centuries. We're a $35 billion company, and you may have seen that over the last few years we've done a lot of things that are changing our company. We've gotten out of the paint business, we're getting out of the performance chemicals business, but we're really focusing on some new things that's new for DuPont. Food, energy, and protection, and that gets to our pioneer brethren that are in the seed business, biotechnology for energy protection, for standard of living as we supply the ever-increasing population around the globe. The DuPont our business actually is part of what we call industrial biosciences. It's a legacy of the Genencor enzyme business, melded with our advanced biosystems in DuPont to provide a new business that kind of bridges the gap between agriculture and advanced materials. So here we are focusing on biotechnology to provide enzymes, provide biomaterials, biochemicals, biofuels that are going to be the next generation of products for the world. If you look at where we're located, we are a global company, global business in industrial biosciences. As you see here, we're in Asia, we're in Europe, we're in South America, and we're in the U.S. And that mirrors where we're working on cellulosic ethanol. We are actually working with customers in all those regions to license technology for cellulosic ethanol. The three different areas, to kind of give you a quick breakdown, we have a lot of knowledge around microbiology, fermentation technology, biochemistry. All those we use to provide different products, enzymes for your laundry detergents. We make bio-based chemicals that are used to make carpet and textiles, which is growing dramatically for us. And of course, biorefineries, where we supply enzymes and other materials for the first generation ethanol businesses, and now cellulosic ethanol and biobutanol. So as you can see, we look at the world when it comes to cellulosic, and we look at what are the opportunities for that. And we actually see opportunities in many regions of the world, and we're very active in all these regions, looking at potential uses of our technology to convert biomass to cellulosic ethanol. So anywhere you are, you may have a biomass that's available that is good for our technology. When you look at our business itself, we kind of have a multi-pronged approach. We're building our plant outside of Ames, Iowa, Nevada, Iowa, 30 million gallon plant, which I'll talk about in a second. But our primary focus is really to license the technology, to work with partners globally to provide that technology, focusing a lot on corn stover, sugarcane bagasse, energy crops, and potentially other ag residues. We provide a full-service technology package when it comes to licensing. So if you want to be able to build a plant, you can come to us and actually be able to take that plant, and we'll help you build it, start it up, and make sure it's going to operate for you. What is our offering? What are we looking to do? We have an integrated technology package that's kind of unique for DuPont because we provide everything from soup to nuts, so to speak. We're really focusing on making sure it's demonstrated and it's investment grade. Low cost, low operating cost, low capital cost, energy efficient, water efficient, sustainable, and we're looking at and working with potential users both in the fuel and chemical industries. If you can look at the breadth of DuPont, specifically in the biotech sector and in biofuels, everything from pioneer seeds, crop protection chemicals, you see the integrated biorefinery technology there, both with enzymes, the ethanogens for the yeast, so to speak, to make the chemicals, as well as the fuels. First thing you have to do when you're dealing with biomass plants, cellulosic ethanol, is get a supply chain. You got to have a feedstock. We've done a lot of work on this area with our pioneer friends, and we've developed a technology and know-how around sustainably and efficiently, cost-effectively providing a supply chain for a plant. So much so we won a Sustainable Biofuels Award in 2012 for some of the work we'd done. Being able to do this and have an understanding of that is very key for supplying a cellulosic ethanol plant. Some of our experience there, we started out in 2010 harvesting about 2,500 acres of corn stover in Iowa and Nebraska. This last year we did 65,000 acres of harvesting, and then this year will be about 190,000 acres in the fall of 2014. A lot of knowledge and a lot of know-how that's been developed for that so that you can have a sustainable supply chain. Our process itself is somewhat different than most others in our industry sector. We have a fully integrated process, as I said. Pretreatment technology is different. It's a dilute ammonia technology. It is designed to be optimized for fermentation and saccharification of the biomass, of the sugars. And then we go through some typical things around ethanol recovery. But we also have a unique co-product solution for the lignin piece that we can provide to customers as well, whether you need to be generating power or not, or steam, or even potential off-site sales of that co-product. If If you look at performance, we actually focus a lot. We're almost obsessed with yield, actually, within our organization. Right now, we're already operating at 75 to 80 gallons per ton of biomass, high sugar conversion, high fermentation conversion. We have new enzymes from our Genicor friends that are coming out to continue to push the envelope, to push past 80 gallons per ton. And we're working on our second generation and third generation technologies to even push those yields further. So yield is a very important part of what we do. Keeps your operating costs down and keeps pushing the technology forward. What do we do when we license the technology? We have a core technology that is kind of the core piece of the plant. But then you also have to understand the feedstock and processing on one end and the co-products on the other end, where there's energy or electricity that you can then put together with the rest of the facility. Getting down to, okay, some of the advantages there, as I mentioned, feedstock, conversion technology, high yields, and the sustainability. DuPont is really big on sustainability. So one thing we designed the process to be is have no wastewater treatment. It has very efficient steam and electricity use, almost zero processed water makeup for the process, and a scalable, customized to the biomass boiler that is an optional unit that can actually make more steam and more electricity if you choose to do so. When you look at our plant by the numbers, we're looking at 30 million gallons plant for our facility in Nevada. We were talking, Chris was talking about the available biomass in the region. We're harvesting about 10%, 8 to 10% of the corn stover in a 30-mile radius of our plant. About 375,000 tons. 590,000 bales of biomass to make 30 million gallons of ethanol. It's a pretty big undertaking when you look at that supply chain. Start looking at some of the pictures. You can see here as we began construction in the fall, our construction partner, Fagan, has really been doing a good job here and just really moving forward very quickly. Now you can see steel and structures coming up out of the ground, as well as fermentation tanks and other tanks for the facility, and you can see kind of a zoom out view of the plant as we're making progress. So we're going to be we'll actually start commissioning our facility, some of the utility units in the second quarter this year is what we're scheduled to do, with a startup later in the year once mechanical completion is done. Summary, DuPont, we have an integrated cellulosic ethanol solution. We're actively working to license the technology as we're building and starting up our facility in Nevada, focusing on making sure that it's low cost, low capital, energy efficient, sustainable, and of course it's backed by DuPont's know-how in biotechnology. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Brooke. Quad County is glad to be able to present our technology here this afternoon as something that's very unique and different from the things that we've been talking about to this point. To give you a little background, Quad County is a 35 million gallon facility in Galva, Iowa. It was formed in the year 2000, and we started cornstarch production in the year 2002. So we were relatively early on in the Midwest in the cornstarch area. I guess as we had the industry evolving, we chose to start to look for some niche areas to add value to our corn. And by doing so, we actually hired Travis Brotherson, who is our plant engineer and in charge of R&D, and we have an on-site pilot facility that was put in place to look into value-added items. About 5 years ago, Travis was able to come up with a process which is now patented, and we are really adding value to the corn that we already purchase and process. We weren't really looking for cellulosic at the time that we put it in place. We were just looking to get more out of the kernel of corn that we were working with. So in a nutshell, we're able to make cellulosic ethanol and add 6% to our yield. We are able to basically get 2.5 times the amount of corn oil we've been getting, and we're able to produce a higher protein feed product than what we've been producing in the past. We went out to fund a full-scale facility about 2 years ago, and we were able to receive some grants from Department of Energy and USDA, as well as the Iowa Power Fund, to fund putting the full-scale facility in Galva. We broke ground on that in July of 2013. The prior picture was our groundbreaking. Here is part of the facility as of last week at our site. We are putting a second fermentation in as part of the process, so these are some of the fermentation tanks. We'll have balance of the equipment in sometime in April, and we will be doing startup in May with full production in June is kind of our anticipated time frame. I think I've already covered this slide talking about some of the items that I discussed early from memory. This is one slide that is probably difficult for you to see all of the words, but the important part is the red line is a typical ethanol plant where we're basically moving the product from the beer stripper right into, I'm sorry, the red line, take it from the beer stripper into the co-product stream, and the green portions there are basically the bolt-on process of adding cellulosic ethanol. So it's very seamless process. You can be running your facility while the construction is taking place, similar to what we're doing today. Again, to reiterate, basically we're getting an additional 0.16 gallons of cellulosic ethanol, which is about 6%. There is a secondary phase of the hemicellulose, which we currently are not going after, primarily because the yeasts that are required to do that are GMO, and they're not FDA approved for the DDG stream at this point. We think that that is a value stream that we may go after later, but it will depend on the value of the feed products as a portion of that decision. We also, again, are able to get 220% the corn oil we've been getting. We're currently, plants are getting 0.5 to 0.6 pounds per bushel. We're able to get 1.6 pounds per bushel of corn oil, pounds of corn oil per bushel of corn. And it does decrease your feed content as far as quantity by about 15%, but it does concentrate the proteins. Again, the facility does operate while you're doing construction, and the tie-ins can easily be done while you have your planned shutdowns for boiler inspections and so forth. I guess I did want to touch on the corn kernel fiber industry implications, because I think this is important. We're hearing a lot about, getting some cellulosic gallons onto the market, being able to make the folks on the other side of the aisle understand that we have cellulosic ethanol coming, and it's happening quickly and it can ramp up relatively quickly. The interesting thing is, between the cellulose and the hemicellulose, you can actually get about 2 billion gallons of cellulosic ethanol out of the corn that's currently being processed in the cornstarch ethanol industry today. EPA has gone through a rule clarification on corn kernel cellulose. I started that process with the help of Jeff Cooper and some others about 3 years ago now. April of this year will be the 3-year anniversary of the first meeting that we had with EPA to get this done. We did get the proposed rule in the last few months. We've gone through comment period on that, and we're waiting for the final rule to be put in place in the next month to 2 months. But it will, according to the proposed rule, qualify under the RFS as ag residue and will qualify for a D3 RIN. This is really just a summary of our timeline. I guess we're going to be completing things in April, starting up in May. We basically want to maximize the amount of cornstarch going through our facility and the amount of cellulose we're able to go through our facility after startup. There will be some unique things where we're able to push alcohol from to the limits of what the yeasts are capable of processing in the cornstarch area. So we're hopeful to prove that we're, in addition to converting cellulose, able to make our cornstarch ethanol facility more efficient as well. We are also working on commercialization strategies to help license this technology to others in the industry. So with that, thank you very much.
Well, thanks, and I certainly appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to not be snowblowing my driveway in Chicago today, and instead letting my wife do it, which I'm sure she is enjoying. Yeah, I'd like to tell you what we're doing in Emmetsburg and with our joint venture. There we go. As Brooke mentioned, we're a joint venture between POET, which is, of course, one of the largest ethanol producers in the world with 27 plants throughout the Midwest, and DSM, a Dutch-based company, but global, focused on nutrition, biotechnology, and materials. And we really came together because we saw that we had complementary strengths. DSM coming from the biotechnology, POET really understanding the ethanol world and corn ethanol, and done a lot of development work on the processes, and the ability to scale this both in the US but also globally. This is what the outskirts of Emmetsburg will look like this summer. In the upper part of the picture is the existing corn ethanol plant that POET has there, and the lower part is a computer model of the cellulosic ethanol plant. We believe in the idea of co-locating the cellulosic plant with the corn ethanol plant for a number of reasons. One is we have excess energy from biogas and also from burning lignin and producing steam. Some of that excess energy we're able to use in the corn ethanol plant. We're also able to use the infrastructure. So we're using some of the ethanol storage, the rail siding, and also the personnel. So we have one crew that's working in both sites, one maintenance crew and one set of people. And also, more importantly, where you see corn ethanol plants is in the middle of corn country. And I think as the previous speakers have talked about, biomass is really critical to this. And we spent a lot of time in developing how to sustainably gather biomass, but also getting to know and get the trust of the farmers in the local area. Because, of course, as they look at biomass, they like the opportunity, but when they look at the farm, they're not looking for what can I do to make money next year, but how can I run this farm for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and they're really looking for the long term. Now, from there, I'll just move quickly on to pictures. You can tell as we go a bit further that these are all fairly recent because you can see the piles of snow. This is looking kind of through the stack yard towards the plant. We have a stack yard next to the plant that will hold about a month's worth of biomass, and the majority of it will be kept in farmers' fields that we'll bring in just in time. But sometimes just in time may not always work, particularly in some of the winter storms we've had, so we have a month of surge capacity that we can bring in. This is the inside of the biomass building. We'll bring in about 2 days of biomass into this building. Inside this, it's ground and conveyed into the pretreatment. This is looking at one of the largest structures in northern Iowa. This is the pretreatment and the tower there. So you can see the center with the steam explosion and under construction. This is a picture of about, I think, 3 weeks ago or so. Here you're looking at the back end of the plant, so the solid fuel boiler and some of the equipment being put in there. Here you're looking a little bit at an angle of the pretreatment, and you're looking over at the saccharification and the fermentation tanks. And finally, backing into the back end to the solid fuel boiler and the equipment going in. We're in the midst, as you can see, of still the final stages of construction. We should be mechanically complete at the beginning of second quarter, and then we'll be starting the plant up in the latter part of the second quarter. It should be up and running by end of Q2. And a little bit, as some other people talked, our model is to eventually license this technology out. One of the advantages that we really see is that we have the ability to really do a one-stop shop. So with the skills that POET brings and also with DSM, we can come in, we can build a plant, we can start a plant up, we can actually staff the plant, we can do the ethanol marketing for it, we'll be producing enzymes on site, and we think that model makes a lot of sense financially, and also the yeast. So we really can do a sort of soup to nuts package and cover everything.
Thank you very much. So we have about a half hour for discussion, which makes me very happy because that's the part I like the best. But I want to encourage folks to come up to the microphone, and there are no bad questions. You can even do one of those statements masquerading as a question if you'd like, and we'll respond to it. I will start. I want to ask everybody the same. I have sort of three categories of questions. The first category is, why did you do this? Second category is, where are you going with this? No one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to be one of the first on cellulosic biofuel, but I'm just going to build one plant. And then the third question is, what are the primary bottlenecks, really? What are the challenges going forward? So maybe I'll start at the end of the table and work this way, sort of the opposite order. So why did POET-DSM get into this? Was it policy driven? Was there, and Steve, if you weren't part of the decision, you feel free to speculate. Was it policy driven? Was it something you were seeing on world liquid fuel markets? Was it a technology? What can you say about POET-DSM's joint venture and why it happened?
Well, I think the reason we started it, you can look at it two ways. Certainly there was financial aspects where we believe in this business, we believe this can be and will be a good business long term. But I also think if you look at the two CEOs of our companies, Fikasibas of DSM and really the founder and owner, Jeff Broyne of POET, they believe in this as sustainability. They believe that we need to move away from oil, that we need to move to next generation feedstocks. And they firmly believe, and as companies we both believe, that we need to look at agriculture and then we have to go back to really, as we say, living off the land. So I'd say a dual decision. Certainly we think it's a good business and we think we'll make some money in here. But absolutely, it fits with our corporate cultures of both companies, and that's very strong.
Delayne?
Quad County, as I indicated earlier, is really looking at this as a way to get more value out of the same kernel of corn that we already procure and process and sell the components of. And this is just a way of getting at the additional value is really the way we were looking at things. And as we got into the project, I think there became other reasons why we continued on top of that. You know, it is something that adds net income. There become some carbon intensity reasons. And then frankly, when you look at what you can actually have as a marketplace to roll that technology out into existing infrastructure, that may make a lot of sense as we get ready to go commercial with this to other plants. So it really started just with adding more value, and you know, it's become a bigger project as we've gotten into it.
Ken?
I think DuPont got into this. We actually started doing research on this in 2002. So this was pre-RFS, and I think at that point we started looking at what we call the mega trends globally, and that is you look at the growing population, the growing, increasing in standard of living globally, and the energy demand. And when you start looking about 7 billion people today, 9, 10 billion people by 2050, the demands on the energy, demand on food, demand on the things that provide good standards of living are very important. And so we started focusing on things that can bridge those gaps. And so we started looking at things like food and then biotechnology, which went into biofuels. And so I think that, as Steve said, some of those things are very similar, that being able to leverage agriculture, to improve agriculture, and to live off the land is a key part of this, because whether you believe in peak oil today, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, being able to provide the energy that's needed globally for 10 billion people is going to be a tough challenge. And we believe DuPont is also works with refining technology and oil and gas. We believe kind of in the all of the above strategy, that biofuels are a big part of that fuel strategy going forward.
Thanks. Chris?
Well, from Abengoa's standpoint, Abengoa has always believed that ethanol is a great product. As I said, we've been involved in that industry for over 20 years, and you know, the ability to reduce your dependence on imported oil, to obtain the greenhouse gas benefits of a lower GHG product than petroleum, those are great goals in and of themselves. But it's a great product. As is proven today, it's, you know, less expensive than petroleum, higher octane, and you know, the molecule itself is a great molecule. At the same time, there are limitations on how far you can go with starch-based ethanol, and Abengoa recognized again, as I think the same with POET and DuPont, roughly 10 years in development has been the idea that we can produce this product by extracting the sugars from other types of organisms, any kind of plant material. So that has been the focus for the last 10 years. Clearly the fact that the sheer volumes that we thought we would need needed to come from more than one feedstock. We needed to be able to diversify feedstocks, to have more than one option. And then frankly, along came the RFS in 2005, and that was a tremendous incentive to invest in the United States in particular, and as a result, largely of the RFS, the great majority of our development has occurred here in the U.S.
Thank you. We have a question. The bright lights prevent me from seeing who you are.
Okay, Larry Johnson to Minnesota. Increased corn yields are getting greater and greater amounts of corn stover on the land, and we're also hearing from a lot of environmentalists, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about, are we mining the land, are we raping the land, and so forth. So it's an issue to be addressed. My question to you is, assuming 200 bushel corn land, assuming that'd be about 5 ton per acre of stover, and minimal slope on it, what do you see as the highest amount of stover you can take off of that without reducing your carbon content? And stretch it a little bit, because if you can take off 3 ton per acre instead of 1 ton, you're probably going to lower your cost of collection by more than a factor of 2.
Who would like to take that?
I can take that if you like. Well, when we started looking at this, maybe 2009, we're understanding a lot of the questions that were out there from the academic community, environmentalists. One of the key core values for DuPont is sustainability and environmental stewardship. So we started trying to understand and answer a lot of those questions. How much corn stover can you take off the land? What about nutrient replacement? What about carbon content in the soil, erosion, all those different things? And so in 2010, when we started doing our first test harvest, we had a number of different protocols we set up to try to understand all those very specific things. And as you're starting to see corn yields grow, to raising from 150 bushels per acre to 200 bushels per acre, and there are places in Iowa where you can get over 300 bushels per acre. Essentially, when you have a ton of grain, you have about a ton of biomass, a corn stover there. So when you start thinking about all that corn stover on the field, we are starting to see some actual benefits from removing some of the corn stover, where we can actually see that you can make sure you have plenty of nutrients in the soil, and we only remove a portion of that. We see maybe, and I had this in my slide, maybe about 2 tons per acre, assuming about 5 tons per acre on the field. That's probably a maximum. Maybe it's 1 to 2. And then you get into things around rotation and making sure you maintain the soil. So being a good steward to the land is key to making sure you do this correctly, and make sure that you keep all those things in mind: carbon content, nutrients, erosion, and all those things.
Steve, you want to?
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'd only like to add that there's no set answer to that question. I mean, it is very dependent, as has just been discussed, on the specific area that is involved, and as mentioned, in areas around Hugoton, it's mostly irrigated corn, significantly more corn plants within the same square, footage or square acreage, and none of us at this table are going to go out and invest hundreds of millions of dollars in a new project and then shoot ourselves in the foot by angering our supply in the area. But as I would like to point out, it's a little bit different for every site and for every particular farmer, perhaps. So you have to be on the ground. We've been on the ground for the last 5 years in Hugoton, working with soil conservation agents, working with farmers, working with their land analysts, and trying to make sure that everything we do is to the satisfaction of the farmer and will be sustainable over the long term. So that's the only way you can approach a project like this. And as I pointed out, there's 15.3 million tons of stover available within 50 miles of our plant, and we only need the 0.3 part. So we only need 300,000 out of over 15 million tons. It's not too difficult to operate sustainably under those scenarios.
Steve, you have something to add there?
No, just a quick. We're taking. We've done a lot of the same work. We've done a lot of work with Iowa State, and we're taking about 1 ton an acre. That's conservative, and I'd agree with Chris. I think it's smart to start out conservative. Let's learn, let's prove it, and then ramp it up. And yeah, we'd like to take more off in the future, but only after we can guarantee 100% that it's proven and sustainable.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
Yeah, Jim Hettenhouse with CEA. And my question is, the relationship with the farmers is really key, and how you deal with that, because there's a long history of having an adversary relationship there. And Brooks, you remember when we were looking at pulping straw and corn stalks when you were part of your Bluestone network?
Blue Water Network.
And the only plants that I'm aware of was a wheat straw plant, and then the Israelis built a corn stover plant, and they used baled feedstock that had so much dirt in it that it shut down, their plant shut down regularly because of the erosion to it. And I saw Abengoa recently in one of their presentations actually included the dirt in the feedstock as one of their problems. Then furthermore, there's this adversary relationship. And I can remember when Larry Russo at New Energy put together a CRADA a long time ago to look at how he could process the corn stalks. And the farmers agreed to it initially, but then they said, gee, we need more money. Build on to one more example, Cargill built a Durafiber plant to process flax straw in Saskatchewan, making a renewable piece for the Mercedes car. It was the door panels and the back ledge above the seat by the window. And there the farmers said, gee, we need more money, and Cargill said we can't afford it. The feedstock isn't fungible. The farmers look at year to year, and I see some really emerging problems here as you look at substantially increasing the need for a non-fungible feedstock that's full of dirt and a lot of soluble materials that's going into your process.
Okay, so another feedstock question. So you've got dirt in your feedstock, you've got some feedstock challenges. I was at Blue Water Network in 1997-8, so I have no memory of what I did back then. But so can we address that question?
I'll jump in. I
Okay.
mean, first of all, we have the exact opposite of an adversarial relationship with the farmers. I mean, we're very close to the farmers. We've had our biomass team collecting biomass for about 6 years there, and we have the exact opposite of an adversarial relationship. They look at us as an important customer. They're interested in it. We've worked with them. It's very hands-on. We've got guys in pickup trucks wandering around the farms there and getting to know them. Yeah, you have to learn how to harvest it. Dirt is something you have to figure out how to manage. That's one of the things we've looked at in taking lower amounts off the field. Helps to manage the dirt. So, yeah, will it be a feedstock price? Will that be a topic over time? Sure. You know, it's always going to be no different than in any business where you have a feedstock going into a process. But I would say we're working very hard, and I think if you talk to the farmers in the local area, they like having us there.
I would agree. You really have to have a partnership. We see this as a partnership with the farmers. You can't do this without them, and so we've worked a lot with our pioneer people to understand and get to know the farmer. We want to try to make sure that we actually have a little bit of a unique model where we actually go in and harvest the biomass. We want to try to make sure that we do that quickly, efficiently, and we make sure that we do no damage to their land. We don't impede the harvest of their corn or in the land prep for the next season. So it's all about listening to the farmer, partnering with the farmer, and making sure that you do something that's value added to them and not an adversarial way.
Yeah, well, the only thing I would add is, and I certainly agree with all that, we have a great relationship with the farmers in the Hugoton area. In fact, we just completed a record 100,000-ton harvest in November of corn stover. So they've been very cooperative. It was very successful. We have we really don't have any major concerns about feedstock supply in the area.
Okay, thank you. Another question?
Yes. Bonnie Estes from Grand Bio, and I wanted to look at the other end of how you think you're going to get value out of the fuel. So I know that none of you are the government relations people from your company, but just thinking about how are you going to get value from the D3 RINs? Are you going to sell into California for the low carbon fuel standard, and how you're actually going to sell the fuel? So pick any one of those.
I'll go ahead and go first since I've been pretty quiet so far. There's a lot of unknowns, so if we can look at what Bruce Babcock did this morning and make a whole bunch of assumptions, I think we can answer your question. But my belief today is that the EPA has put us in a spot where the D3 RINs have lots of uncertainty to them, and what the RFS final RVO ruling is going to have a huge impact. So that certainly is an unknown. Having said that, if we assume that cellulosic RINs are going to have a requirement, there is going to be a way to monetize that, but we are on the cutting edge of that. I think there were a few in 2013, but monetizing that is going to be a learning process. I guess we work with EcoEnergy, and we've put some plans together in regards to how we can monetize that, and we're working through that here as we start up our facility. But the first and foremost part is we have to have an outside third-party engineer come in and certify that we are actually producing our product from corn kernel cellulose. We have to get that to the EPA. EPA has to stamp it as approved, and at that point in time, we will be able to start producing those D3 RINs. From the production point, now we have to either find a blender of record or become a blender of record in order to strip that if in fact the end user is not willing to pay more value. So I think that will become the critical point. We will be able to either sell the ethanol for a higher value because it carries a D3 RIN, or we'll be able to be a blender of record and strip those and hopefully sell those to a required party, you know, sometime within each calendar year. So that would be the RIN side of it as I see it. From a carbon intensity standpoint, we're also working through what our value with CARB would look like, for example, and that really has two functions. One is how low can your carbon intensity be on your product, and then secondly, what is your freight to get it to California, which is the market that is paying for that low carbon fuel today. You know, if in fact there are other states that replicate that, the freight may not become quite as big of a factor, but that definitely does give some plants an advantage over others as we look at that carbon. So I guess that's going to be an unknown for us until we turn the plant on and can also verify exactly what our engineered electricity and natural gas are, for example. But we have done some preliminary numbers, have an idea what that carbon intensity looks like, and we do believe that that will be a value in our value stream that we're going to be able to capture. And that one is probably more certain today than what the D3 RIN is today, just because of what's going on with EPA. Hopefully that answered your question.
Others want to weigh in on the question?
Covered fairly well.
Good. Thank you. Another question. Tim.
Thank you, Brooke, and thanks to the panelists. First of all, I want to thank my name's Tim Ports. I'm with Ethanol Producer Magazine, and have had the privilege of reporting on this industry. And I want to follow along with maybe some of the comments that Delayne just laid out about the uncertainty with the D3 RINs, and ask all of the panelists to comment about how the irony of commercialization of this next generation of ethanol seems to be falling right on top of maybe the throttle being relaxed a little bit on the RFS, and if that affects or is coloring your licensing strategy. I think virtually everybody included licensing this technology in your go-forward path for this endeavor. So if you could comment on the connection of the RFS and what you're up to, I'd appreciate it.
I'll kick it off. I mean, first of all, what the RFS and the ruling brings is uncertainty. And when you're going out and we're working to bring financial resources into it and bring people in that want to spend money on ethanol plants, and when you have uncertainty and then you're trying to get, say, $1 billion to build a number of plants, that never helps. So the uncertainty absolutely hurts in the RFS. Now, that's a US story. So certainly it doesn't impact the rest of the world, and we heard things this morning about other countries. So yeah, I think the RFS and more, not maybe the volumes for 2014, I don't think that's too much of a big issue, but just the fact that they're stirring the pot causes uncertainty, which does impact short-term the ability, I think, to license in the US.
Yeah, I'd add to that certainly that is an issue. At the same time, I think the EPA has indicated that even they recognize that they were trying to help the ethanol industry, and perhaps they didn't do it in the best possible way. I have really a high amount of faith that the EPA is going to improve their projection and really move in the right direction. Certainly, the fact that they have made the proposal that they have made has been a very impactful thing on this industry, and yet at the same time, I believe that is something that can be undone by future support. So we are anxious to see where the EPA goes. Certainly on the, as you mentioned, Tim, you're correct. I think all of us up here have the idea that we have a proprietary package, and we're very interested in licensing that. I think there is value in the RINs. I think while that is a little bit uncertain at this point in time, historically there's always been some premium for for the DC RIN or the D3 RIN, and in addition to that, there is the California premium. In addition to that, there's the potential of a cellulosic production tax credit. And as I mentioned in our presentation, frankly, the efficiencies of cellulosic ethanol production have already been improved so dramatically that we're approaching cost of production of traditional grain ethanol. And if you look at what happened in the grain ethanol industry over a period of years, cellulose is just starting, but over the grain industry, it's become much more efficient, significantly more in the way of yield in gallons per ton or bushel of feedstock. We expect the same thing to continue and the same trend to continue in cellulose. So we think there's a great market. We think there's great opportunity due to the carbon score. I mean, today in California, that's close to 25 cents per gallon, and that's that's a huge benefit right there.
I think I would agree. The uncertainty in the RFS certainly has kind of thrown a curveball at a lot of people and made them think about things. But it is really a U.S. thing, and my belief is that, like Chris, that eventually for cellulosic, that's going to get sorted out, and we're all three going to be generating ethanol this year, hopefully, and selling that into the market and counting on those RINs. But my belief is that if uncertainty remains, then will that slow down investment in the U.S.? It's hard to know. But what I do believe is that if it doesn't happen here, it will happen elsewhere, because we're talking to people globally who are very interested in cellulosic, second-generation ethanol, and they're ready to move forward. And so if it doesn't happen here, it will happen elsewhere. And so hopefully the uncertainty will kind of resolve, and we'll be able to move forward with cellulosic here in the U.S.
I guess our process is obviously different than the other three, and so my outlook on the RFS and the uncertainty is a little bit different. It's very important for the certainty to have rapid implementation of any process, but in the value that we're looking at, if you recall, we're getting more out of the same kernel of corn we already purchase and process. And so our process actually makes money without relying on the RIN or any government funding of any kind. Now, the payback is much better if in fact we have that, and I think that will impact the implementation curve for other plants because it will have an impact on payback by having the RIN value or some of the cellulosic tax credits, for example. So that would be my outlook on it.
Thank you. Howard?
Yeah, Howard Marks with Energetics, a contractor to the U.S. Department of Energy Bioenergy Office. My question is to Chris. I just wanted to be sure that I heard you correctly, that you think by the end of the year or sooner you'll be able to get the price down to your ethanol to $2 per gallon. And if that's true, what does that mean in terms of the industry comparisons with other feedstocks in the market, sugarcane, ethanol from Brazil, et cetera? I mean, that's just a huge pricing point, amazing. So I was wondering if you could discuss that, what the implications of that are.
Well, like, as I mentioned, I think I agree. I think this is a huge deal. This makes cellulosic ethanol potentially very competitive. I can tell you also that these are our projections as to where we think we will be the end of 2014 or in 2015. But today we have already shown dramatic improvement over the last 3 or 4 years, as I mentioned in my presentation. So, and again, to stress, these are operational costs only, not capital costs, and so we still have some work to do on the capital cost side. But we believe that cellulosic ethanol shows great promise to be very cost competitive as the technology matures and as we continue to improve enzymes and yeasts and processes that are specifically designed to handle this type of feedstock and to extract the sugars and make these improvements. So we also think that there are multiple other feedstocks that are available out there that are on the cusp of commercial reality, such as again, municipal solid waste and wood waste and other types of feedstocks that give great great flexibility and great opportunity.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to touch on, Chris put up a learning curve slide, and you get little economies of scale and cost reduction. Anybody else want to touch on what they're hoping for or expecting when they do the same?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, we kind of view ourselves that we're, if you correlate us to corn ethanol, we're in the 1980s when you look at cellulosic ethanol. And so you look at the improvements in the corn ethanol industry over the last 30 years, and the efficiency, capital cost, operating cost, all have been driving to a very good point. So we're very early in this industry, and I think that, as Chris has stated and many of us have seen, costs are continuing to drive down both on operating and capital cost. And that's been a big driver for us, as well as yield of performance. So I think we're kind of on the edge of where we are today, and looking at the future, I think you're going to see lower and lower cost and more competitive product.
Maybe just a quick, what's exciting now for us, but for all of us, is we have lots of people in labs working very hard to do this, but soon we'll have operators and engineers working on the plants to really take the plants and learn what works and doesn't work. Because when you go from the scale we're all going to the scale we're going to be building, that some things will work wonderfully and some things won't work as well. And we'll figure out how to fix those and go forward. So I think what's fantastic is we're now really in the manufacturing able to make those improvements, which will really prove to where we get huge savings.
Delayne, you want the last word?
I don't have a lot to add to that. I guess we also will learn as in regards to what some of the cost structures would be, and maybe our biggest unknown would be what the enzyme cost is going to do over time, because I do agree with the concept of the enzyme cost coming down as you get more volume, because all the enzyme companies that we've talked to, they're in a startup mode with that, so they're trying to recover a little bit of R&D. They're trying to get enough volume to make themselves economical, and I believe that they will continue to have enhancements even in the corn kernel fiber that will, get more yield out of the fiber that we have access to within our plant, and the cost, I think, will also come down over time. But I'm not in the enzyme business, so I'm just talking big picture and hoping that that is actually the case, because from an economic standpoint, I think it does make sense that that should happen.
Well, I am in the enzyme business,
okay.
So I'll comment on that. So if you look at what we've done with Genicor enzymes as DuPont, we've reduced our enzyme consumption over the last 5 years by about 75%. And we've got more enzymes scheduled to come out in the next couple of years, the next generation and the next generation after that and the next generation after that. So I think you're going to see lower and lower dosage rates, higher and higher yield, and lower cost. That's just where the industry's headed, and it's not just DuPont, but I know that's where we're headed, and I think that's going to apply for everybody.
Thank you very much. Please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists. And I think there's a refreshment break sponsored by another AEC member, Clarion. Thank you all for coming.